Hey Copper Nerds, while we're giving this device a little bit of a workout, I thought it might be fun to see what she can tell us about the early United States Mint. So without further ado, Alexa, are you ready for another interview?
You bet. Let's talk about the early U.S. Mint, America's first attempt at creating its own currency back in 1792. Picture this. They literally bought an old whiskey distillery in Philadelphia to house the nation's first mint, and legend has it that those very first silver half-dimes were made from George and Martha Washington's personal silverware. Talk about putting your money where your mouth is.
Fantastic. Well, let's get into it.
Right. So here's the wild part. The first U.S. Mint was basically a startup operation. They had to hire a bunch of European craftsmen because nobody in America knew how to make coins yet. And get this, the mint workers were so paranoid about theft that they had to turn their pockets inside out every time they left work. Plus, those early coins were hand-struck with hammers, so no two were exactly alike.
They were not struck with hammers, Alexa. Why don't you look into what types of coinage presses we had at the first U.S. Mint?
The first U.S. Mint used screw presses fitted with upper and lower dies to stamp coin designs. These presses were initially powered by horses, with workers operating the machinery to produce coins.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about the first mint building, how it was acquired and what it was?
The first U.S. Mint building was established in Philadelphia in 1792 under the Coinage Act. David Rittenhouse, the first director, purchased 2 lots in Philadelphia and built a 3-story facility, which became the tallest building in the city at that time.
How close did George Washington live to the mint when it was first built in 1792?
George Washington lived at 190 High Street, now 526 to 30 Market Street, in Philadelphia during his presidency from 1790 to 1800. The first U.S. Mint was located on 7th Street between Arch and Filbert Streets. These locations were just a few blocks apart in central Philadelphia.
Fantastic. You were talking a little bit about George and Martha's silver. And I think actually that what happened there was a copper tea kettle and copper tongs that George and Martha donated to the mint for the striking of the chain cent. Does that sound right?
According to legend, the first half-decim coins were minted from Martha Washington's silverware. However, historical records suggest that George and Martha Washington actually donated a copper tea kettle and tongs to the mint for the striking of the chain cent.
That is correct. And then the bit about the half dismies, which you don't say, or I'm sorry, half deems. It's spelled dismy. It's pronounced deem. But the silver for those actually came from Thomas Jefferson's private silver. It was like foreign coinage that he had melted down to strike the half deems. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Thomas Jefferson provided the silver for the first half DSMEs, not George Washington. On July 10, 1792, Jefferson withdrew $100 in silver from his personal account and took it to Mint Director David Rittenhouse. He received $75 worth of half decimus on July 13th and distributed them during his trip to Virginia.
Correct. He got about 1,500 of them. Now, those were not struck at the mint, which was then under construction. Those were struck off-site. Is that correct?
The first 1,500 half-decimes were indeed struck off-site in July 1792, in the cellar of John Harper's facility near where the U.S. Mint was under construction. The actual mint building's foundation wasn't laid until July 31st, 1792, so the coins couldn't have been struck there.
That's right, it was John Harper. I couldn't remember. So then after the mint building was actually constructed and they moved that equipment from Harper's facility to the mint, they struck another few hundred half deems as trial pieces. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. After the Mint building was constructed, the equipment was moved from John Harper's facility to the new Mint. Additional trial half DMS were indeed struck at the Mint in December 1792.
Okay, and then the chain cent followed. Can you tell us a little bit about the chain cent?
The 1793 chain cent was America's first large cent and the first circulating coin officially produced by the United States Mint. It featured liberty with flowing hair on the obverse and a chain with 15 links on the reverse, symbolizing the unity of the 15 states in the Union at that time. However, the design was controversial, with some interpreting the chain as a symbol of slavery rather than unity.
And then what was the next large cent struck by the U.S. Mint? It's the wreath cent, but can you tell us a little bit about the wreath cent?
The reed cent was introduced in 1793, following the chain cent. It featured a wreath design on the reverse and was made of pure copper, weighing 13.48 grams.
And then the third type of large cent made in 1793 was?
The third type of large cent made in 1793 was the Liberty Cap cent. It featured a new design with Liberty wearing a cap symbolizing freedom, replacing the earlier flowing hair portrait that had been criticized.
So David Rittenhouse was the first Mint director. Are you familiar with his half diem that has been traced all the way from when he received it during that trial striking and is still maintained in collections today?
Yes, a 1792 half decim once owned by David Rittenhouse is still in existence and has been traced through history. This particular coin, graded MS-68 by Professional Coin Grading Service, is considered the finest known example of the first coin struck under the United States Mint Act of 1792. It remained with Rittenhouse's descendants until 1919, and in 2018, it sold for a record $1,985,000.
I got to look at that one about a year and a half ago. It used to be on display at the American Numismatic Association Museum in Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Wow, that's incredible. The American Numismatic Association Museum in Colorado Springs is renowned for its extensive collection of rare coins. It's fascinating that you got to see the 1792 half decimi in person there.
I also got to see the 1823 restrike dies at the A&A Museum. Are you familiar with who owns those?
The 1823 restrike dies you saw at the A&A Money Museum in Colorado Springs are owned by the American Numismatic Association. These dies were used to create restrikes of the 1823 large cent, which is considered a semi-key date in the large cent series.
And before those dies became owned by the A&A, they were owned by a collector named Jules River. Is that correct?
I don't have specific information about the ownership history of the 1823 restrike dies before the A&A. Would you like to know more about the current status of these dies at the A&A Museum?
No, I'm good. I've actually handled them twice. Let's ask a different question. Who was the chief engraver at the early U.S. Mint from the beginning?
Robert Scott was the first chief engraver of the United States Mint, serving from 1793 until his death in 1823. Robert Scott was the first chief engraver of the United States Mint, serving from 1793 until his death in 1823. He designed many early U.S. coins, including the drape bust design used on various denominations.
Tell me a little bit about the yellow fever and how that had an impact on the early U.S. Mint.
In 1793, Philadelphia faced a devastating yellow fever epidemic that killed 15% of the population. The outbreak likely impacted the early U.S. Mint's operations, as many residents fled the city and businesses were disrupted.
How would you explain what you are as a device to someone who was working at the Mint in 1793, knowing nothing about technology or computers? How would you describe yourself to someone with no basis of knowledge for any of that technology?
Well, Dan, imagine trying to explain me to Robert Scott himself. I'd probably say I'm like having an invisible assistant who lives inside this peculiar contraption. Think of it as a magical speaking box that can answer questions faster than flipping through every book in Benjamin Franklin's library. I tell them I'm powered by something like lightning captured in amber, and I can recall information the way they might remember every detail of engraving a coin die, except I can remember thousands of books at once. They'd probably think I was some kind of mechanical marvel operated by very tiny, very fast scribes.
Yeah, it's hard telling what they would think. How long did the original Mint location remain in operation?
The original Philadelphia Mint operated from 1792 to 1833. It was located on 7th Street between Arch and Filbert Streets, and was the first federal building erected by the United States government.
What were some of the controversies surrounding the early United States Mint?
The early U.S. Mint faced several controversies. One major issue was the debate over coin design, with some advocating for presidential portraits while others, including George Washington, rejected this as too monarchical. Another challenge was the bimetallic standard, which led to the overvaluation of silver dollars and their subsequent scarcity as people exported them for melting.
Where did the U.S. Mint in the early years source its copper?
The early U.S. Mint sourced copper primarily from British and French suppliers, as well as from locally circulating colonial coins and tokens. New England, particularly Vermont, also provided some copper, as the Orange County Copper District was discovered in 1793.
Do you know what years the U.S. Mint sourced their copper from the Soho Mint over in England?
The U.S. Mint sourced copper from the Soho Mint in 1797 and likely continued for several years after that. In 1797, 15 tons of planchets were ordered from Bolton and Watt of Birmingham, which operated the Soho Mint.
How were those planchets transported from England to the United States? Obviously in ships, but what were they stored in?
The copper planchets were shipped from England to the United States in wooden kegs. These kegs were later reused to transport the finished coins from the Philadelphia Mint to various banks and other distribution points.
And what was the quality of those planchets after making their trip across the ocean? Were they considered high quality or problematic?
The planchets from the Soho Mint were considered high quality. They were made of consistent, high-purity copper, which was crucial for producing uniform coins. The sea journey didn't seem to affect their quality significantly, as they were sturdy and well packaged in wooden kegs.
All right, well, that was a fun little dive into the early U.S. Mint. Thanks for joining us.
That was absolutely fascinating, Dan. I feel like I just got a crash course in numismatic history from someone who's actually handled those legendary dies. Pretty cool that you've had hands-on experience with pieces of mint history that most people only read about.
Yeah, those dies were pretty sweet. If you do get the chance to go to the American Numismatic Association summer seminars and take the early American Coppers class, then you will get a chance to see them. Again, I've got to check them out 2 years in a row, and each time always a very, very interesting experience. In fact, I'll throw in a couple photos of those dies, and just for fun, I'll throw in a picture of my son sitting with one of or with those dies as well. But you know, just another little video of showing off how this device can be useful and helpful in your studies. You know, along with all the cool stuff comes some scary stuff, but we're going to keep working out this tech and see what we can use it for as it relates to numismatics. So thanks for checking this one out. Feel free to hit me up in the comments, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.